Chris.
Hey, what's going on? Sorry about that. That was a user error on my part.
All good, all good. I'm so glad that you're here, though. So thank you for joining me. Let me open up my Chris Lynn notes, and I'm really excited to have you here. While I'm just getting settled, tell people a little bit about you and where what your background is, and why I have you here coming to talk about people first leadership.
Yeah, well, Jeff, thank you again for having me, and congrats on the book. I'm really excited about getting my hands on that thing. And yeah, so I'm Chris Lynn. I am the host of the Leading People First podcast, and I do a bunch of work traditionally in learning development. So I go into organizations and help build their learning programs, and um, I just love everything around L&D, everything around DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And so that's where I really believe that we can make a difference is by building people up for success in the roles that they're in order to make change. So yeah,
Got it.
really excited to be here.
Awesome, man. All right, well, let's get into it. We got about 20 minutes where we can talk about people first leadership. So I figure a great place for us to start is I think a lot of people have a lot of different things that come to mind when the word leadership comes up. And I was wondering if you could just share for us what you think of and how you would define what are leaders? What is leadership? What is the role of a leader?
Yeah, at the heart of leadership, right, is people, right? We're not doing anything unless it's about people, and I think that's what often gets lost in translation when we think about leadership is we think about businesses, we think about profits, we think about systems and processes, but really at the end of the day, the people that are doing the work are people, right? The things that are making things happen are people, and we need to focus on those people. That's who we're leading. And so that's why leading people first is all about recentering the human experience for leadership.
Why do you think it's so difficult why is that not the culture? Because when you say it, it seems so obvious to me. And I know that we're very much aligned in our perspective about the role of a leader and what is leadership, but it would seem that business is just people doing stuff with people, right? It's transactions with people amongst people. Being at work, it's just interactions of people working together towards a thing. So people are seemingly always right in front of us. Why is it not the case that that's the default? Like why are you doing a podcast about it, and why am I writing a book about it that people are not out in front?
Because we have not prioritized that in our society. What are the things that we've prioritized, right? It's money, it's success in various terms, but we have not prioritized the success of people as humans, right? We haven't prioritized what it means to have a healthy relationship with ourselves or with other people, right? We've prioritized this idea and we've created this idea in society. And I'll speak strictly from the the American United States experience, that we are always looking at success from the materialistic, and the only way to get that material is through, unfortunately, money. So that kind of mindset that we've created as a society has shifted our priorities, and leading people first is, and I heard you saying it, is putting people over profits and not the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your work, you do this sort of people first leadership training and coaching and things like that. And then you also have this podcast, which is up to how many episodes now?
I'm just over 50 or 60 episodes. I think that's around where I'm at.
Yep.
But yeah, it's really about helping others understand that this model of business of putting people over profits is successful.
Yeah. So, in all that experience, the podcast, the number of people you've spoken to about these issues, the people you've worked with professionally in this way, w- describe for us a little bit, what does a people first leadership culture even look like? What are some of the things that they do differently?
Yeah, it's around creating an experience for the individual and what we can do to make them successful. It's about creating an environment that allows them to be the best person that they can be, and not the other way around. Rather than seeing what can I get out of that person in order for me to achieve a different goal, right? Using people as a means to an end, but really focusing on those people and ensuring that they are successful. So it's it's around having conversations and developing those relationships in order to identify how you as a leader can maximize their strengths and create environments that will allow them to succeed in the roles that they're in. While yes, as a manager, in this facet, you still need to get work done, but in doing so, you're putting the focus on them and not the work itself.
It's so interesting. Like when you mentioned treating them as humans, I thought like, wouldn't it be nice if it wasn't the human resources department, but it was just like the human department? Like we actually
Yeah.
cared about the people and not them as resources. That would just be such a nice little shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
oh, well, I just had this thought the other day, the HR, people ops, whatever whatever the industry is like thinking of itself right now, it's going through this monumental shift of trying to get back to that human experience because it has been such a risk liability or a de-risking department within the organization that the thought that I had was, well, the reason HR has turned into this money or this unhuman department has actually been the need for or the desire to become more valuable to the business.
Mhm.
And the reason they want, or the only way they can be more valuable to businesses is by thinking about the dollars and the cents. And so again, we've turned a whole industry of human resources and people operations that should have been for people and turned it into, again, a we have reprioritized or deprioritized the human experience.
So I've given this talk a number of times about my experience in my MBA. And when I went to my MBA, I was very much the outcast. Like I didn't, there were a lot of people, previous experience in finance and accounting, and uh, I was just lost. I was like, I'm kind of a creative marketing type, and I don't really belong here, right? So when I got out of my MBA, I realized that I walked away with a couple big lessons, and one of those lessons was that money is the language of business. And I think what we're talking about here is kind of a fundamental shift in the language that we use when we think about and talk about business. The thing is that the reality of business is still that we think in terms of dollars and cents. We think in terms of revenue and expense. We think in terms of profit. We think about it, unfortunately, in a lot of companies, about returning shareholder value. So then we enter with these different proposals of putting people first, focusing on people's growth, creating diverse, equitable, and inclusive environments. And naturally, what we get back from businesses, well, what's the actual value of this? What's the monetary return we're going to get from this? How are you seeing in the conversations you're having, in the spaces you're playing in, how are you seeing the receptivity to these concepts opening up and kind of divesting a little bit away from that conversation around money, but still acknowledging it?
Yeah, and that's a key piece, right? Is we still have to acknowledge it. We still have to kind of play that ball game, right? If everyone is playing the game a certain way, we can't suddenly change the rules on everyone. We are very, unfortunately, small group that is looking to make that shift. And so, as we're making those shifts, right, we are going to have to create more of a basis for this. And this will require us to change the culture of how we value people and money. And again, our society didn't always prioritize the money and the financial aspect of it. That's really only happened over the last 150, 200 years. And so what we really have to do is make that shift back. And it's going to take a long time. If it took this long to get to where we are today, it's going to take about that long to get to where we need to go. And so it may seem really tough to do, but as we're continually having those conversations, we need to remind other managers and other executives that the long-term investment is where we're going to see that return on investment, right? It's never going to be in the short term. Never. For example, I just onboarded a new team member on my team this last week. And when we look at something like new hire onboarding, we typically try, or most managers I see typically try to pass that off to other team members or other people that they manage. But that is a critical time, what I believe as a time when you need to build that relationship the most. I'm, as a manager, going to invest my time into that new hire and spend as much time as I can with them because this is the time when they need to be cultivated and grown and have an environment where they feel safe, where they can explore and do the things that they need to do. And I know that that initial investment is going to pay dividends down the line.
I completely agree. And there's like a buyer's remorse thing that almost happens with, there's kind of two things that happen after somebody gets a job, right? There's the initial high of the new job, but then there's also a little bit of buyer's remorse. Should I have taken the other position? Should I have taken this job? There's all that. And I think the job of a leader and a lot of that, and to your point of not passing it off, is to say, no, you made the right decision. This is a team where you're going to grow, you're going to thrive, you're going to have opportunities. And
Mhm.
I think this speaks to something else. I'd love your take on this as well. But I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, why would I invest in people when they may just take all of the skills and growth and everything and take that with them to a competitor somewhere else? To which my response would be, well, if you create the right environment, they're not going to leave, right? Like if you keep giving them opportunities for growth and everything, then you don't have to replace them. But I'm curious what your take is on that when people kind of come in with this idea of maybe I don't know if I want to invest in people because what if they take that elsewhere, or what if it's all for nothing, or what if we have to fire them later, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, what happens if you don't? Right? Like, let's
Yeah.
flip that on its head, right? And what happens if you don't invest in them, right? If you don't invest in people and their growth, your retention rates will go down. And the cost of rehiring someone in the same position is incredibly costly. Now, let's say this employee has some skills that need to be developed. How much productivity are you losing? How much revenue are you losing by not investing in them? So usually that small little investment again pays dividends, but you're not going to see it right away because skills are not turned on and off like a switch, right? And so those are things that we have to remind executives and other managers is that we, as much as we would like for these things to be quick and easy, they are not. And so we have to make that initial, like we've been talking about, that initial investment in order for that to see change down the end, down the line.
Got it. So I'm going to ask you one more question before I ask you my final sign off question. I'm going to ask every guest, but um, if you were talking to a new manager, let's assume that right now amongst the people watching this video, either live or later, that there's a new manager who's, picked up the Lovable Leader because they know it's a great new manager handbook, and they they need to know, where do they start when it comes to putting people first? What are some of the first things that they need to do? What are some of the first conversations they might have? What are some of the things you might encourage them to think about? How would you go about, think of this as like the 2-minute new manager orientation to people first leadership. How would you go about describing that to them?
Well, for leading people first, it's about, and lovable leaders, it's about centering the human experience, right? Figuring out what other people need. I would say that there's a step even before that, though, and that's discovering who you are as a leader. And I
Yes.
think that that's something that we don't focus on as much, this idea of self-reflection, because how will you be a effective leader or an effective leader if you don't even know how you lead yourself or how you come off as yourself? And that's something that I've really discovered over the last year and a half, and having these discussions with other leaders is having the ability to be humble and adapt and change and be willing to grow yourself and accept new information in order to grow. That is how you're going to make a bigger impact than if you were to just come in and say, okay, I'm just going to focus on you, but down the line you as a leader may trigger something that creates an unsafe environment or creates hostility or creates resentment with that individual, even if you have the best intentions for that person. But if you are not self-reflective and willing to change and grow as a leader, that's not gonna it's not gonna work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I somewhere in the book, I think I wrote something. You're not just accountable for you're not just responsible for the intent, but also the impact, right? So it's very much that you might go into it with the right intentions, but if you're not thinking about how this might create potential ramifications down the road, then you're not doing a holistic look at your role as a leader. So I completely agree with all of that. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to shift over to your experience in your career and ask you about the people you've had the chance to interact with in your role. and in your career. And when I say the term lovable leader, one of the things I love about this book that I wrote is that the title was actually the first thing that came to me. And it just resonated for me because it immediately conjured for me people that I've interacted with that I was like, wow, that was a leader that I really loved. They were great. They really had it, they had my back. They looked out for me. They cared for me. And I feel like this is an experience that we all kind of share. And this could be someone from our personal life. It could be someone from our professional life, but there are lovable leaders in our life. So I'm curious for you, when you hear the term lovable leader, like who's the person that comes to mind, and what is it about them that made it that way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The lovable leader that comes to mind, ooh, there's a few. Um,
We got some time.
yeah.
Yeah, talk about it.
I would say the lovable leaders in my life, there's a couple, and one of them you're gonna talk to later is Yvonne Alston for sure. Absolutely
Yeah.
a lovable leader. Um, and when I talk about Yvonne, it's what her and I talk about all the time. It's not just what's going on in the mind, but what's going on in the heart, right? And aligning with that heart space. Other lovable leaders are individuals like Melissa Goldner out in New York. She is an incredible leader who's focused on making change and paving a path for the people behind her or the people around her. She went into a very traditionally like male dominated field and very white dominated field, and she created the space to allow the women and people of color behind her to grow within that field in that industry. So that's another individual that I would say is a lovable leader. For the people that have managed me myself, um, I would say I'm racking my brain over the years. Um, my one of my last bosses at I don't know if I can name her out loud to be honest, but I will say the characteristics of what she has done has been to always ask and focus on me as the person and not me as the work. And so what she's done or what she did was to always focus on asking me and having those small conversations and building the relationship that her and I did or her and I had in order to create that trust and that space to allow me to be open if anything else were to happen. That way, if there were issues from a work perspective, I would feel comfortable bringing those things up.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I think, the element of care there, the element of trust there. You didn't say it, but I would imagine there's an element of kindness there. You mentioned safety. I think all of those things are just so critical in the relationships that we remember. I mean, I think even when we look back, I know for myself, when I look back on the leaders I've had in my life, if they didn't possess those things, I don't generally think back and remember them fondly. You know, and even as far as I'll give you a good example of someone that I had in my life that I thought was like a is a really unique example of this that seems counter to what I think lovable leader conjures in people's minds. I had a business coach who, when I met him, I was like, this guy rubs me the wrong way because his personality was one that I generally would struggle with. He was kind of gruff, he was very direct, and he was like, a little abrasive at times. And I've always dealt in like in sports and everything. I never dealt well with coaches who were like, they would yell at you and get in your
Yeah.
face about thing. I wanted the ones that would support me and help me grow. But I took on working with this coach because I was like, I feel like this is going to be an area of growth for me to work with this guy. But I also, under all of it, even though he was abrasive, even though he was a little gruff, I could tell that he cared. I could tell that he was actually invested in my success. That when he was challenging me, even though it was tough for me, even though it was something that made me feel like, God, this is annoying, I knew that he was looking out for my best interest there. And I actually knew that when he was telling me something that I could trust, that he wasn't doing it for his own benefit because I was going to pay him regardless, or I was going to work with him regardless.
Hmm.
And I knew that I could trust him for that. And even when he asked me to do things, when he asked me to like take on projects for myself, he let me know that I could do it. He gave me the ability to look at myself and see what I could do well, and gave me the the I guess the confidence to know that I could actually go and achieve that goal. So he also created the safe travels. So even though we sometimes have people in our lives who may be difficult or who may be challenging to us or whose personalities we may find grating, we may not even like them, I guess is the point. We may still be able to love them for what they bring to us and the way that they look out for us, the way they care for us, the way we can trust them, and the way that they provide that safety for us on the way to our goal. So I wanted to point out that example because it came to mind as you were telling me about people that like, here's a person from my life that's just counter to what you generally expect in that term.
And that's why diversity is so important, right? And I know that we're essentially at time, but I want to point that out is that we need that diversity in our lives, and it's not just race, it's not just ethnicity or nationality or gender, but it's also personalities. It's also this idea of you need people to push you, and you need different types of people in your life to challenge you and help you grow because I tend to go back to the plant and gardening analogy.
Yep.
Even if you are surrounded by rocks, if you still have that good soil and you can poke a little bit through, it's still going to allow you to grow. It's just forcing you to change the direction that you may have gone, and that's okay. And that's something that it's uncomfortable for us, but it is still okay, and it still allows us to grow. And you don't have to follow this specific personality type to be a lovable leader or to lead people first. You can still be who you are and be authentic and help others and still be focused on the people.
100% agree. Chris, you have been an amazing person to kick off this event. Thank you for coming on and talking with me about people first leadership. Thank you for all that you're doing out there. I love following you and I love the stuff that you post. I love the people that you talk to, the conversations you have, and the leadership that you show out there in putting people first. So thank you for being out there and being a lovable leader. Thank you for coming on and supporting me in the show. Like, I really, truly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to support you, Jeff. And again, congrats. And I'm looking forward to everything that you're doing.
Thanks, man. And I'll see you tomorrow. For those that are watching, Chris is actually our closeout event with Yvonne Alston for tomorrow's event. So that is super exciting. You've opened the event, and I will see you at the closing ceremonies as well.
Sounds good. See you
All
tomorrow.
right. I'll see you.